I've got a band traced around the outside of my Lazy Susan. And the way that you can do that really easily is to use a compass. And you want to use an expensive compass, not a cheap compass. These, I don't know, they're about 10 bucks or 12 bucks or something like that. But they have a wheel that locks. They have adjustments on all these little pins. Mine is kind of falling apart. But you set the compass to your measurement. Say it's a 1/4 inch measurement on the outside. And you put the stainless steel part on the outside, and then you trace it by keeping it straight. You want to keep it straight up and down. And just run it along the edge. And that gives you a perfectly even edge on a curved surface. So you don't have to worry. And then to make the next line, you just widen it. Widen it? Is that a word? Okay, not sure. Okay, you get that set where you want it. Keep it straight up and down. And then just run it along there. And what I'm going to do is make a band here and do a sponging effect. So I'm going to use a little bit of a kind of a wet paint. And I'm not necessarily going to be totally in my lines, because when I do my sponging, it'll be out of lines. And then I'll just use my black paint to cover up, to mask, to correct any overages after. So I'll have to retrace this afterwards, so don't be too particular. Hey, when you're sponging like this, and I've got a band and a border, I don't want to have, and notice how messy this is. I've got all kinds of out of lines because I know I'm going to just patch that with my black paint. When you're sponging, you want to use a sea sponge with the big open holes. If you use one of those really tight, dense sponges, like almost like a kitchen sponge or something, then you're not going to get an interesting texture, and that's what you want when you sponge. I'm going to try and keep my mess on one side and another, so that when I'm using my dark color, I'll be on one side and my light color on the other side, because I don't want to be bothered cleaning my sponge up before I'm all done doing this. You want it wet, it's moist. You want it fairly wet. You can pour some water on your palette if you think that you're not wet enough, and just pick up some as you as you go. So pour just a little bit out there. So my water is in the other room and I'm filming in this room, so I don't want to be bothered. Anyway, you'll pick up on one side of your sponge just a little bit and kind of mush it around, okay? And then you'll go through, and like I said, this is going to go over the whole entire thing, over the black edges and everything. Pick up a little bit more if you don't think you've got enough, and sometimes you gotta stand up to do this stuff. Turn your sponge as you go, and you don't want to base coat. I'm noticing that I'm getting a little heavier on some parts. Like I said, don't worry about going over your edge. Now you're going to pick up some of your lighter, I've got deep burgundy. I'm not sure that this is going to show up too well. Oh yeah, that's great. When I go into my next color, it's going to be a much lighter color, and I want to be really, really careful with this. So I'm going to load it onto this red area and make sure that I kind of mush it a little bit. And that's a lot of paint, a lot of paint. So I'm going to tap it off on my palette in a few spots. Okay, now when I come over, make sure I'm nice and open. And you're going to get messy when you do this. When I come over here to do this, I'm just going to, whoops, that's a little too bright, just what I thought. I'm going to mix it. So I'm going to mix my next color with my, what color was that again? Deep burgundy. And just barely touch. Barely. That's when those little pores of the sponge are going to do the work for you. Now, maybe I want this to be a little bit more blended. So I'm going to go in and twist with the clean back side of my sponge to make that just more mottled. So do the twist, baby. Okay. We don't want this to look like a bad sponge job from the 1980s. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll go back with my black and I'll just clean up all my edges. I'll let this dry. I'll use my compass to retrace my line to make sure I've got it straight. Use the black to clean it up, and then trace my pattern on. We're going to add some vine work to our design. And And I like to do that freehand. You can certainly trace it, but it's much more natural looking if you don't. We're going to use a round brush. We're going to use thinned paint. It's not soupy like you're going to line. I guess it's soupy, but not like milk or cream. Just thin enough so that it'll flow off your brush. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to use this liner work as filler. We're going to start down with a fairly heavy line, and then twist the brush between your thumb and your forefinger. And we can base coat right on top of this, and then lift to your tippy toe, and have it just kind of trail off. And then bring some overlapping lines. Okay. And we're going to have these kind of wind their way to either side of the design and connect with this. Not too fussy over here, just enough to just kind of keep the eye moving around in the circle. You probably are going to have a couple come behind here and trail up. Okay. And then we'll highlight these and do some playing around with them. Because I had water in my brush, the color of my vines after they've dried has mellowed out. So I'm going to pick on some of the top vines, and I'm going to re-highlight them just by re-base coating, by just following on top of the line. And that will make them a little bit brighter in the spots that I want them. Okay, so we're going to float the details on our candle cup with the antique maroon. And we want to use a nice wide flat liner. I'm not overly big here. This is like a size 12. I want to lay down my brush just a little bit because I don't want to lift off. If I go just along here, it'll be a littler float. So I'm going to lay my brush down so that I get a little bit of a thicker look. Careful of your water so it doesn't fall all over the place there. Okay, and then while you're waiting for that to dry, you never want to pull straight across through, never want to pull straight across a wet float because it will lift it off. So while you're waiting for that, you want to walk out your color over here. So you come over here and then just start walking it away. Now what's happening as you're walking into this, you pull this float down. As you walk away from it, you've pre-wet the surface with the clean side of your brush so that it will float nicely and make an excellent float. So I'll come over here, same kind of thing. Sometimes the glare makes it so I can't see. You could mop this if you want to. I'm not a big proponent of working extra hard, but if I needed a perfect float, I would mop that. And you want to put a really strong float on either side of the little candle cup holder thingy. Okay, and I'll go back over here on this cup. You want to wipe right across this area right here. You know what? Let's wipe right across our candle as well. Sink him in there. Okay, so see now that makes that candle inside that cup. Okay, we can repeat our floating with a deeper color. Just a skinnier float. And then that'll make it look like it graduates out a little bit more. You repeat it in the darkest areas is where you're going to repeat that color. Let me turn our piece. So you're pulling towards you. Okay, to get the highlight in the middle, we're going to go to our cheater brush. This is a Crescent stencil brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a technique I call dry rubbing. And so we'll take our dry part of our paper towel, we'll pick up just a little bit of paint on our brush. There's no water in your brush and you don't want to touch the wet spot on your paper towel. And then you rub off all the paint that you can, really hard. Okay. And then right in the highlight area, I'm going to begin rubbing. Gently at first. And you want to carry it all the way over to where we did some of our floating. Kind of towards the bottom, not quite all the way to the top. And the nice thing about this is it's going to give you a floated look right in the middle of your piece, but you didn't have to do any weirdo float type maneuvers. Okay, but now we want to make that a little stronger, so I'm going to pick up my lighter color and I'm going to wipe that off. Okay, when you leave your brush in water, this is what happens to your brush. Now you can still use it, but your handle's going to crack, which is irritating. However, it's still a functional brush. If I would keep my brushes out of the water, it would be great. So now we want to reduce the area that our coverage is in into this middle area. We want to be within that other highlight, and that's going to give us that cupped appearance. Get it about where you want, but maybe you think that you might not quite be bright enough. Reload your brush, wipe it off on the paper towel, and then you can do your final highlight. I'm getting a glare. You can do your final highlight with just, like this is the area where that light's going to shine, with just a stipple. And that'll increase it without making it stripy. Okay, and I think that that's where I want that. Alright, we want to highlight this rim, or make a rim. And just run some cocoa along that edge. About the same. Try not to get warbly like I just did. I'll have to go back through and even that out. Okay, we want to give ourselves a back rim. Okay, and now we want to highlight. I'm going to do a little dry brush move with got my liner brush. I've got it loaded into paint. I'm going to flick it off on my paper towel. Whoops, did you see that? Sorry, flick it off on my paper towel. And then add this dry, scratchy stuff right onto my little, whoops, handle here. Anytime you feel like you're screwing something up, remember that your base coat can go back in and fix it. It makes an excellent eraser. Now we'll go into our sand color and we'll highlight right in the front of this. Right on the top. Okay, I'm liking that. It's got a pretty good look. Now what you could also do, if this was a rolled rim, you could shade right under that edge. Maybe we'll try lining. See what we get. Do we want it to be a rolled rim? You know, now that rim sticks out just a little bit. So I think we'll leave it like that. Shade our candle. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a concentrated narrow float on our brush, not a lot of water here, and go straight down the edge of our candle. We don't want any edges showing. And then we'll tuck in a float to separate the dripping wax from the rest. And then when that's dry, you'll bring that other float down. You can also float on our dripping wax. You know, fingers make the best blotters. I'm going to tuck in that little divot where that rim is sitting in there. I'm going to float on the drippy edge for candle wax. And we also want to give just a little bit of a highlight to the back edge of that candle. Now our candle wick is going to come through there, and that'll give the illusion of it being in the right position on the candle. So we're going to pick up sand, not sand, but our color sand, on a dry stencil brush. And it's important that these stencil brushes are domed. This one is a domed stencil, the last one was a crescent, but both of them are cut with a dome. And that is what is going to make them not leave those haggard stop and start marks. You're going to rub right up and down the middle of your candle. I wanted these candles to be tinted with just a little bit of this purpley blue to go with our little Advent wreath story. So I'm washing over in a kind of a floaty kind of a movement and then wiping out the middle with, what color is this? Thrown on the ground, Admiral Blue. Admiral Blue. Okay, 3 of them get this treatment. Dry rub on our flame with our stencil brush right in the middle of the flame. I'll leave the top light and the middle red, and then we'll float at the bottom with our blue. We'll take our flat brush and we'll float up to the top of our flame. Give a little brightness. Line the wick with black, bringing it into the candle. And then line right next to it with a little bit of sand when it's on the dark area. Right next to it. And then you get a highlight shadow kind of effect. To yellow up our candle cups, dry rub with some antique gold right over everything that you've done. Not everything, but most everything. Try not to leave streaks like that. I need to dry my brush off a little bit more. Okay, and that'll just yellow him up right up. You can touch a little bit more of your antique gold color on your rims where it's not highlighted. Do the dry rub with our Crescent stencil brush and our, let's see, what color green do we have here? Leaf green. Wipe it all off in the paper towel. And then you're gonna instead of shading and floating, which is harder, we're going to rub on highlights and leave the shadows where they would be. And so we'll do a couple of rubs, once with leaf green and then repeat it with bright green. Okay, and with these you want to keep it, now this one will have to float because that's just going to be too narrow to get into. The more pressure you use, then the wider your brush will set down. So you want to use light pressure and just rub pretty hard. Reload as you need to. You can switch to a smaller brush if you need to. I like to try and keep things simple and not do that if I can help it. Okay. This is much easier than floating everything. You want to use shape following strokes as well. If you get on your background, then you can just base it black out. Now we'll add some of the lightest green, the bright green, rub it off, and highlight just in the centers for a brighter highlight. And if you need it a little bit brighter, you can mix white plus the bright green. Use your liner brush with your leaf green, bright green, and line in your veins. Thin it with water. I'm going to do some drop shading all on the, let's see, what side is that? All the left sides of the lettering of black plum. It just helps the letters pop out just a little bit. We're going to use our round brush, and we're going to dry brush in the middle of the letters. Go ahead and highlight within your highlight, pardon me, with golden straw. the left, like right next to the edge of your letter with Country Blue. Add a little water if you need to. Oops, add a little water, watch it run off your brush if you need to. Okay, we're also going to take our flat brush and we're going to spread some of this love around. We're going to take our Country Blue and float just on the edges. See, helps if you blend it well. But just on the edges of some of our leaves. And what we're going to do is walk that color across the bottoms of the leaves so that your eye jumps from one place to the other. Not everywhere, just some. And put a little bit of it on your candle cup if you want to. I'm going to highlight some of these vines with a mix of the golden straw and the cocoa. Just a little bit within what you have already there. That's going to make them really pop. You can bring some down on to, you know, some of these leaves. Give it a little Scooby-Doo action there. Just kind of lead the eye through and around with the next color up. And then make sure you have some tendrils. Make sure they don't get too bright. Okay, I'm going to float on our Candle Glow Antique Gold. Nice sea stroke. Okay, now we're going to dry rub after that dries, after your float dries, dry rub with more Antique Gold to bring that in closer to the flame. And then we pick up some Antique Gold and we do a little bit of the sparkle dust kind of thing. Just tapping. I don't really have any water in my brush. Wipe your brush off and then pick up some sand and tap within your Antique Gold for a stronger sparkle. Oops. We don't want this to be like a base coat though, so be real careful that you have taps and not blobs. Okay, and then wipe your brush off and give your candle cup down here in the brightest area a little bit of that sand as well. And then you can also give that brim just a little bit brighter as well. Increase some of the highlights on your leaves with the bright green and the white mix to boost them up to the level where they're going to make everything happy. We want it to have some continuity of color going around. And now we have to add spatters to the tips of our green leaves, so we use a little nugget like this, or my paint bottle opener, and my Filbert rake, and we thin to paint and smack sharply to get the spatters, and then we turn as we need to. We want them just at the ends of the leaves to kind of extend where the leaf is. If you spatter way up high, you're going to end up with snow. I don't want snow. So anchoring it is what keeps us from having snow. I'm also going to spatter off the ends of the green, off the end of the green leaves where we put the purple, towards my letters. To carry that color around just a little bit more. The last thing I need to do is tint this other candle pink. Wiping out the middle. We need to add little C-stroke highlights to our berries. Just a little bit to the ones that aren't near the candles. And then we'll add a little touch of sand as a stronger highlight. And make them sparkle just a little bit.